Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, where we explore relationships, divorce, separation, and parenting apart. This episode is part of our mini-series where we answer your questions, discuss current news and events, and share practical bite-sized tips. I'm your host, Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor, divorce specialist, and co-founder of Amicable, the online legal service for separating couples. In this mini-episode, I'm sharing some top tips for navigating divorce and separation when your children are adults. Now, if you know somebody, a friend, a colleague, or a family member who would really benefit from this episode, then please click that share button now. Now, I guess many of us assume that adult children might make separation easier. But the reality is there's additional emotional complexity, and that doesn't disappear just because children are grown up. In some cases, it actually makes it a bit more difficult. Adult children, like all children, really benefit when parents can present a kind of together, calm approach to divorce and separation. And if you have respectful boundaries with your ex and you can get the communication right with adult children, then you can have a really amicable separation because there aren't the kind of detailed arrangements about who's going to be where that need to be made. And that can actually lower the emotional temperature sometimes. But the key to all of this is getting that first communication right. And that's really important because what I see all too often is often people divorcing when they've got adult kids are very much more relaxed about telling their children that they're going to get divorced. And they might almost say it as quite a flip comment or, at an inappropriate time. So one of the key tips and the key pieces of advice is to really think about picking your moment and how you're going to have that conversation with your adult children. And some of the same kind of tips and advice apply to when you've got small children. So first of all, if you can, then try and do it together. So just like you would plan to tell small children, be together and have had a conversation with your ex before you wade into it. So make sure you've got some of the messaging straight between you. Picking a time that isn't like a family event. So don't do it on the back of a christening or a wedding or a traditional Sunday lunch that you have, but trying to find a time where you can have that conversation when there isn't all of the wider family involved and there you can just get maybe your children on their own or with their kind of life partners. That's absolutely key. So making sure that, as I say, you've had a conversation and you know what you're going to say, that you've agreed it with each other and that you're going to present it in a calm way in a moment that works for all of you is really good. Now, I always think it's easier if you invite them to your house. So you invite your children to your house rather than you go to their house because you're giving them the option to leave. And if they want to be a bit stroppy or they're feeling upset, then that's probably the best thing to do. Allow them to leave, not put pressure on them to stay or to talk or to engage in a conversation, but just allow them to take some space. If you're doing it at their house, that makes that whole thing a bit more awkward. So my advice, and of course it's different for every family, but my advice would be invite them to yours and allow them to leave. And then that's kind of cool. I think one of the other things is there is a temptation if your children are adults is to slightly overshare and to say things to your adult children that they don't necessarily need to know or need to hear. And I think holding that line and in this scenario, just keeping more to yourselves is a better way forward and a better way of engaging with the subject. So I would be really cautious about oversharing. I think the other thing is, again, because you've got adult children who are capable and who might have jobs where communication is a big part of it, for example, there is a danger of kind of painting your children into the role of a messenger or a mediator. And again, particularly if you're older, it might seem like a great idea to get your children to do some of the more complicated bits for you. But I think you have to just reflect on what that does to the relationship in the longer term. And it is much better if you can to keep powder dry and don't put those expectations on them, even if they're super capable or offering. Sometimes I think it's better to say, no, that's fine, we've got this, but thank you, I really appreciate your support. And here are some other ways you might be able to support me. I think when you've got older children, the chances are you've got a more complex family setup. Your children may well be single, they may well be married or living with somebody, they may have their own children. So thinking about how this is going to impact the wider family becomes quite important. So having a conversation with them about how the relationship is between you and your ex. Are you able to be in the same room together? Will that work? If it does, fantastic. You can share the normal Christmases, weddings, graduations, family get togethers, and it's less hassle. But if that's not realistic, maybe for the first year or even the first few years, then just talking through with your children what the plan is and having a plan as well between yourselves, how you're going to share seeing grandchildren, if you've got grandchildren, how you're going to share going to special events if it's not possible for you to attend together. If it's too difficult to have that conversation with your ex, then getting some help from a service like Amicable or a mediator is a really good idea, because this is your family after all, and you want to be able to share in all aspects of family life, both of you, if you can. So, not cutting that off for one of you is really important. But if you need some additional help to get a plan together between you and your ex before you go to speak to your children, then by all means invest in that. If not, and you can speak to your children and you can acknowledge that things might be difficult and more tricky, and you do need to carve out the time, then making sure you've had that discussion with all members of the family and you're realistic about how you're going to work as a family once you're separated is really important, because the grandkids will want to see both of you and they'll want a relationship with both of you if you have grandkids. And so making sure that one of you isn't cut out of the picture is really important. And sometimes that often happens to the parent who hasn't had as much time with the family or whose role hasn't been as much time with the family. So it's really important, if you're in that scenario, not to feel like you're sidelined, and that you do have the availability and the option to be with the wider family and to see your children and your grandchildren. I think with all of this, planning and communication are key. You can't control the uncontrollables. So, what your ex does is beyond your control. And so, laboring under the idea that you can have this all neatly tied up in a bow is never going to work. But if you can approach this with some calm and some kindness, you can think about having a proactive conversation rather than just letting things unfold. That will go a long way to staying intact as a family, even if you're not living together anymore. But it will help you keep those relationships with your adult children. Because with adult kids, a lot of the infrastructure has fallen away, and it might already be that they're leading very independent lives. They might be in other countries, for example, or you might not see them as often as when they're smaller kids. So, having those rituals, those things that you can hold on to, the things that are just about your relationship with them, is really important, and not missing out just because you're not the parent who typically does the communication is really vital too. So if you have to grasp the nettle and learn those new skills, then this is the time to do it, because your relationship with your children is equally important. And so making sure that you've had a conversation with your ex about the children, even if it feels like, as adults, you don't need to be looking after them in quite the same way. Being there for them and maintaining those relationships is really important. So don't skimp on these conversations just because your kids are grown up. They still need you. They still need you to be their parents, even if that looks very different. And they'll still want to maintain that relationship with you. So try and make it straightforward by making sure the two of you are having those conversations before you talk to your children. I hope you found this episode interesting and helpful. For separation and co-parenting support, please visit amicable.co.uk, where you can explore our free resources or book a free advice consultation. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn and hear more about new podcast episodes by subscribing for updates and visiting thedivorcepodcast.com or you can find us on your favourite listening platform. And finally, don't forget, we would love to know how we can help you further. So please share your questions on divorce and separation and co-parenting with us at hello@amicable.co.uk. They might just be the next topic for a future episode. Thanks ever so much for listening.